I would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today and just taking the time to join today. Good morning. My name is Sihle Boyo and I am the project manager for the African Climate Action Partnership, and I will be facilitating today's conversation around the pathways for implementing livestock NDC commitment in Africa. Next slide, please. But before we get right into it, I will just quickly go through what we have like house rules. While I do that, can you please quickly just drop your name, organization, title, department, and where you're joining from while I take us through the house rules. Right. So Zoom house rules will be mute. Please keep your microphone muted during the presentation. You will be able to unmute during the Q&A and plenary session, Q&A session. And then video, please keep that off to prevent network strain or your bandwidth. If you have any questions or pressing questions during the session, please submit these via the Q&A chat box at the bottom, and we'll address them during the Q&A session. Always, please just use the raise your hand function to ask questions during the Q&A. And just please note that the session will be recorded. Next slide, please. All right, just a quick run through today's agenda. So we are going to have our opening remark from Catherine from UNOPS, and then we'll be followed by an overview, the status of livestock measures in African NDCs by Roy from AfCAP. And then we'll have Amable on how national policy frameworks can support effective NDC implementation. And then right after that, we'll have our Q&A session. If at any point you have questions during these presentations, please feel free again to just like drop them in the chat box, and we'll get to them during the Q&A session. I'll hand over to Catherine. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sigle. And let me first express my joy and excitement of being here. My name is Katrin Lichtenberg. I'm heading the Water, Environment and Climate portfolio of UNOPS, and GCAP and AfCAP as the African branch of GCAP is hosted by UNOPS. So it's really great to be here, and I extend my warmest welcome to all of you. I see you already quite numerous, and that's fantastic. It's a very critical discussion that we are going to have here today of looking in how implementing livestock NDC commitments in Africa can be accelerated. What has happened so far, and how can we take this further? I'm pleased UNOPS is supporting the great work of GCAP and in particular AfCAP there as well. As mentioned, I'm heading the WEC, the Water, Environment and Climate portfolio, which brings together a critical group of climate initiatives. And we see the core value really of GCAP and AfCAP there. And I see of how instrumental the work of AfCAP and GCAP is when it comes to climate action implementation. It aligns very well with UNOP's core mandate of closing the implementation gap. We know this within the climate action discussion. Implementation is the mantra, and there are still some obstacles. I see GCAP and AfCAP as a very critical element to accelerate right now. And generally, this is what we do at UNOPS. We focus on turning the high-level commitments that are made at the COPs and so on, and bringing them really on the ground where they are necessary and required. Just maybe a few words also about really the discussion today. Livestock is a critical element. It in Africa holds more than a quarter of the world's livestock, and across the African continent, one can say it's more than just a source of food. It's an insurance policy, a savings account, and also really is very closely linked to cultural identity of millions or hundreds of millions of people. while the animals are the backbone of the agricultural GDP in Africa, they are also, of course, the growing source of greenhouse gas emissions. And, just according to my information, progress is there. But in the last round of NDCs, we had only 2 countries who have quantified their livestock emission targets. So that's something we want to address here and provide support to change this. Managing well the economic progress and the climate future is something that is challenging, but we think there are ways to tackle this effectively. We've seen encouraging progress lately, and I think I can thank many of you for the excellent work there. Livestock and livestock GHG inventories have been strengthening. We have been moving forward with country-specific emission factors and therefore improve the data from livestock. However, I think we're here today, there is still a critical gap, and therefore we would very much like to accelerate and support of how we can improve inventories into clear, credible, and actionable commitments within the NDCs. Collecting and managing reliable data sets are essential for this. And the design is, of course, this will help to design appropriate mitigation action, and through this also support the access to climate finance and in general build trust and transparency. So that's why we think the livestock community of practice is very critical. And we like this format. We think this is a very, very effective format. It is a means to share practical, real world lessons on improving data methodologies. We think it's a good way to support peer-to-peer learning so that countries can confidently apply better inventory approaches, and it creates a vital platform for deep technical exchanges and directly informs policy and decision making. We see a perfect alignment of the livestock community of practice with our own strategic priorities as UNOPS, where we are focusing on how can we help countries to strengthen their climate action implementation capacity, how can we promote evidence-based climate planning, and how can we enable countries with real-world climate action implementation. That's what drives us as UNEPs, and that's why we are so excited about the session today. We are very interested to learn about the ongoing efforts of how that bridge can be built between technical analysis, between the policy uptake, and then also ensuring that improved data systems lead to real-world impact for countries and communities. I want to thank the organizers for the discussion today and really send you all my good vibes and energy for a very productive session. I'm looking forward to hearing and listening in on the discussion. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sigle.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for that wonderful remarks on livestock and GHG inventories, and also just like getting your UNOP standpoint on this conversation. The next person to speak is our very own Roy on the status of livestock measures in African NDCs. Can take it away, Roy.
Thank you, Sikle, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see some of you, and it's a pleasure to be part of this webinar. So I'll be carrying on from these opening remarks, and as we heard in the opening reflections, the Livestock Community of Practice has been working for a few years. So as we enter this new phase, we thought it was important to do a stock take of where we currently stand. So we reviewed all of Africa's NDCs to assess what our levels of ambition currently stand at. So as we know, livestock is really important for livelihoods, but the livestock sector is really vulnerable to climate change. We already seen heat stress, shift in rainfall, degraded rangelands, all affecting productivity, across the continent. But at the same time, livestock is also a key source of greenhouse gas emissions, particularly methane. So the key opportunities, how do we improve productivity and resilience while also reducing emission intensity? And really the key to this is that climate action in Africa should focus on efficiency and resilience and not herd reduction. So as I mentioned, we've conducted a review of NDC submissions to date. So as of April 2026, 24 countries have submitted their NDC 3.0, 26 still have their second NDC, 3 countries only have one, and there's only 1 country that's not submitted any NDC submissions. So the information I'm sharing is basically based off the analysis of each country's most recent NDC, and we focus specifically on livestock measures. So anything like climate smart agriculture or general terms, we ignored unless they specifically reference livestock. Looking across these 53 NDCs, it was clear that progress is being made to integrate livestock into NDCs. 40 countries are explicitly recognizing that livestock vulnerability to climate change is one of the key challenges that the country faces for development, demonstrating that there's really a clear political recognition for climate smart livestock. Yep. So in terms of adaptation, this is one of the key priorities for Africa. Across the 53 countries that we reviewed, 44 countries include specific livestock adaptation measures with a total of 177 different measures across all of the NDCs. Some of the really common adaptation measures are around improving rangeland management, supporting better breeds or more resilient breeds, and also supporting animal health. And then there's also interventions around supporting pastoralism, supporting what we call mobile herders who move around a lot. So overall, adaptation is pretty well prioritized. But this is only part of the picture, and there's also a second side to the coin. So while there is really good ambition and strong interest around adaptation measures, these measures are very broad and generic. They often lack very clear links with how the measures are reducing vulnerability to specific climate risks that specific regions might face. There's very few measures for indicators or effectiveness or success, so it's very difficult to tell to what extent these measures might be being implemented and actually reducing vulnerability, and very vague implementation pathways. So this creates a disconnect where we have very strong ambition, but not really clear actionable plans, and it really limits how we can shift from ambition and policy to delivery on the ground. And then in terms of mitigation, so in terms of mitigation, this is slightly more limited than adaptation. So 33 compared to 44 countries include specific livestock mitigation actions with a total of 79 different measures across all countries. Only 16 countries actually quantify these targets, and often the quantification is more for the whole folio sector, not livestock specific. So Katrine mentioned 2 countries with quantification. So often the countries will put very broad quantification targets for entire sectors and aren't listing specific measures with how much that potentially could reduce emissions. Where emissions measures are included, in some cases they're quite broad, so there's lots of improved productivity or enhanced management. most common measures are around manure management and diet, which is great. But yeah, again, the mitigation measures are quite broad. So they're not exactly broken down into how this would be achieved, how they will be able to track them, or how these interventions can be financed. Also, one of the clear things across adaptation and mitigation measures is that there's really a lot of overlap between what's been listed as adaptation measures versus mitigation measures. Some countries would include measures in both sections, and some countries would include a measure in the adaptation section, while other countries would include it in the mitigation section. So things like feed improvement, animal health, improve grazing access is included across both adaptation and mitigation. And this overlap demonstrates that climate-smart livestock interventions really address multiple issues. So while some things can reduce emission intensity, they also support resilience. But the co-benefits are not always explicitly captured in NDCs, and the data around these is not really as strong for the co-benefit side. And this brings us onto the data side of things, which is really important for mitigation particularly. And data access and availability is one of the big constraints for mitigation in the livestock sector. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, many countries are still relying on tier one inventories. And this has really important implications for their mitigation measures because, as we mentioned at the start of this presentation, climate ambition really needs to be around productivity and efficiency and not so much herd reduction. But tier one inventories use generic emission factors. They don't really capture productivity improvements, and the main mitigation option there really appears to be herd reduction. So this really limits the ability for countries to set credible targets, demonstrate results, and attract climate finance without hurting the livestock sector. So strengthening MRV systems and moving towards tier two approaches is really important in terms of enabling ambitions that can set targets that improve productivity and are tracked and encourage investments. And just on this point, in 2 weeks' time, we will be co-hosting a webinar with the Global Research Alliance to share some of the important progress that's been made by African countries in terms of strengthening their tier two inventories. So look out for that invitation that will most likely be coming later today or tomorrow. And please do join us if this is your area of interest. Another really key aspect of ambitions in NDCs is ensuring that there's clear implementation pathways, and there's really, in most cases, there's not this clear implementation pathway. Specifically, when we start to talk about financing, countries are asked to specify whether their NDCs are conditional on receiving international finance and support, or unconditional, meaning the country will source that from their own budgets. And in many cases, countries are not defining this. I think there's a very small percentage of countries that have defined whether their livestock measures are conditional on support or unconditional. And this really means that the mitigation measures and adaptation measures are not being clearly linked to where countries have financing needs. The small number of countries that define this means that the bulk of countries don't have holistic view of how to implement ambition, which creates a pathway, because without clear implementation plans, without clear investment and climate funding strategies, funders and partners cannot really engage in supporting the realization of ambition. Also, more broadly, historically climate finance has prioritized mitigation, so there's an opportunity there to access climate financing for mitigation actions. But on the other side, agriculture, particularly livestock, has been underfunded, and climate financing has favored energy access projects. So there's really a mismatch between where funds are flowing and where Africa is emphasizing prioritization and need. So yeah, it's really a key opportunity in NDCs is not just setting targets, but also outlining clear implementation and financing pathways. So yeah, to summarize, while there's strong recognition, especially for adaptation, livestock is definitely being embedded within NDCs, and there's a clear acknowledgement of its importance, but those targets definitely need to be strengthened still. Ambition is definitely not translating into actionable pathways. So the targets are often either being unquantified, very broad and unspecific, or miss the implementation details. In order for us to really move forward and progress in strengthening ambition, we really need to support stronger data systems, having better data and MRV that can support clear targets and indicators, link stronger to climate financing, and explicitly link adaptation and mitigation co-benefits. And that's really puts us in a transition point where we now need to shift from recognition towards implementation, and from broad ambition to investable actions. Climate smart livestock systems offer a really powerful opportunity to deliver climate goals while supporting livelihoods and development. So the real question is, how do we operationalize this ambition at scale? I will stop there, but just to mention, everything that I've spoken about in my presentation is available in a brief that we've just published. So if you're interested in seeing some of the details about this that I've just mentioned, you can access this document on our website. But I'll stop there and hand back over to Sikle. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much, Roy, for that in-depth on the status of livestock measures in African NDCs. So now we'll move over to Amable on how national policy frameworks can support effective NDC implementation.
So thank you for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be joining you today for this webinar. My name is Amable Wizeye. I'm a livestock policy officer at FAO. I also lead the livestock climate and environment cluster within the animal production and the health division. I can realize that my presentation kindly overlap with Lloyd's presentation, so I will try to bring some, let's say, additional elements, and maybe skip also some slides that Roy may have already mentioned. So to start, I will share FAO experience in really supporting countries on NDC implementation, but also on NDC design, especially how do we integrate livestock-related mitigation and adaptation measures within the country NDC. I will give a couple of examples on how we build the evidence, and of course the challenges. Of course, there are challenges, and in particular on how those evidence are converted or into the real measures and targets and the way forward. So a quick overview. I will start with the integration and then talk about a little bit challenges and give some examples on FAO work. To start, we address this issue of NDC and livestock really around 5 steps. Firstly, we look at how we bridge the gap between greenhouse gas emission inventory and the interventions that are included in NDC. We look at how we design credible NDC implementation plans. So that's move really from the commitment within the NDC and what are the actionable or action that are really happening on the ground. So then how we prioritize the mitigation and adaptation, and of course unlocking climate finance is important, especially for livestock. So overall, I think this Roy mentioned, so we have a big challenge in Africa that most of the inventory are based on the tier 1 approach of the IPCC 2006 guidelines. This means that most of the emissions is really taking the emission factor from IPCC multiplied by the animal numbers. This is already a challenge because with such a simplistic methodology, it's difficult to implement measures. So it's difficult to bring the evidence. So the other aspects, I think they have been improvement in terms of the language that is used now in terms of commitment. So there are more mitigation measures included in NDC. We see also highly presence of adaptation as more countries they tend to focus on adaptation. However, we see only a low number of those targets are quantifiable. So most of are really more qualitative, but they are not quantifiable. So which is a big gap here. So we can really not achieve those commitments if we cannot quantify them. The other aspect that is very important is how we help. So of course this is one sec. Okay, so it's more about how we bring the different stakeholders at the national level. So what we found is that usually you are all aware that NDC are under the responsibility of Minister of Environment, while the implementation of NDC related to agriculture are under the responsibility of the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock. So this is already one of policy gaps. So we support much more the interministerial coordination, also bringing private sector and also farmers organization to really agree on how to implement this. So we see also a challenge in MRV. I think Roy mentioned this, and of course there is what we call a conditional financial trap. So most of the NDC are quite ambitious, but they are not implementable within the national budget because they are all conditionals. So 8% of the NDC commitment in Africa, they are all conditional. So meaning that without international and international climate finance, there is no action. So this is one of the big challenge which we have been addressing, of course, to help countries really put some of those NDCs within their national action plans. The other aspect is more the prioritization. If we look at the current NDC, we see more measures related to feed management, manure management. We see also silvopastoral systems, especially mixing agroforestry, mixing really trees with in grazing areas. There are also a couple of, let's say, measures that are targeting enteric methane. So this is really a low number of countries targeting enteric methane. Actually, in Africa, 85% of emissions from livestock are enteric methane. So meaning that if we cannot address enteric methane, we are not really addressing the emissions problem. So of course, there are also a couple of measures related to breeding management, especially in terms of how the genetic side, but also the management of the farms. In terms of adaptation, I think this Roy also touched the best here, but I want also to mention mainly the livestock insurance because in terms of adaptation measures, livestock insurance are important because livestock in Africa is highly vulnerable to animal disease, but also to climate change. Therefore, without a strong measures on how we can compensate farmers when they lose their animals, it's really a very huge adaptation challenge if we don't implement those insurance. And so far in NDC, I think we have a few countries that mention this. So in terms of climate finance, if you look at globally, let's say at African, there is a need of $2.8 trillion to implement the NDC. It's a huge amount. It's a huge number. This, and if you see, most of, as I said, 80% of those are conditional, meaning that this require international climate finance. And when you look at inside, you see that 4% of the finance required is to support mitigation. So in terms of where the funding is coming from so far in Africa, we see that GCF, the Green Climate Fund, is contributing 20% in the climate finance. We see also the GEF with 18%, and the others, like mainly bilateral agreement between countries or other climate finance sources, contributing around 50% of those. So what FAO has been doing, of course, FAO has been supporting countries in improving their inventory for aforo, but in particular for livestock. We have been supporting countries to access GCF and GEF funding. This by providing evidence on greenhouse gas emissions, reductions, climate vulnerability, and so on. Yeah, FAO in terms of let's say GCF funding, it's there are a couple of many projects. Actually, not a couple. There are many projects already in Africa that are addressing agriculture, but not necessarily livestock. So I think we have only one single project in East Africa addressing targeting only Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, and Tanzania. That is fully funded by GCF and IFAD on livestock. So livestock, let's say climate finance for livestock sector is very, very tiny. So I think this mainly, Roy mentioned this, but I can come back again on this. So what we see is that there is a limited data on livestock inventory, especially that you can imagine that most of countries in Africa don't have any recent agriculture census. So meaning that the animal numbers are mainly, we don't know the actual figure of animal numbers. So what we most is used are more projections than at country level, but they don't reflect the head size. So the other aspect is more what we call the policy alignment. In Africa, of course, in many countries, it's important to align the climate commitment with national policies, because if they are not aligned, they never cascade into the ministerial action plans, and of course, there is no budget allocation. So this is very important because in terms of governance in Africa, policy is very important. So therefore, NDC should be well aligned with the policies. We also observe that there is a lack of farmers' participation. So usually, livestock farmers are not involved in the decision making, and sometimes the commitment made farmers in the sometimes also the institutions responsible for livestock are not consulted when those commitments are unmet. So at FAO, what we have been doing, so we have been supporting the evidence-based decision by also facilitating multi-stakeholder collaboration. We host two multi-stakeholder partnerships, so the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, but also Livestock Environmental Assessment and Performance Partnership. In Africa in particular, we have been organizing regional stakeholder engagement workshop. For instance, this was 2 years ago in Kenya, where it was a workshop we organized with AfCAP. So thanks, Roy and the colleagues were there. Here, the idea was to bring together the Minister of Livestock and Agriculture and the Minister of Environment to talk about climate action within the livestock sector. The idea was to more influence the new generation of NDC and also to see what are the key solutions that a country can adopt to reduce methane, for instance. So we also support countries on capacity building, and we have two like the FAO GREEN model, so the Global Livestock Environment Assessment Model, that now is available online as, for example, a package on R, so that a country can really use such model to improve their Tier 2 emission estimate. So in terms of climate finance, this I already mentioned. We are tracking the climate finance mobilized for livestock sector. So it's still less than 2%. So livestock sector receive less amount of money, but livestock is responsible for 30% of greenhouse gas emission, in particular methane, from at global level. So it's 30% in terms of methane emissions, 12% in terms of greenhouse gas emission globally, but receive less than 2% of climate finance. So this is a huge gap in terms of how livestock can address this. So we have been working on addressing these issues, and one of the new element we are exploring is the carbon market. Carbon market is a new instrument that we believe livestock sector in Africa can take advantage to, but of course, this requires a huge institutional capacity building and also engagement across different stakeholders to address the different risks, especially the social and environmental safeguards, as well as to avoid any issue, especially related to the greenwashing, because this requires really a huge investment in MRV. Talking about MRV, what we have been doing, this is an example of the greenhouse gas emission assessment for the Republic of Central Africa that we conducted recently. This report is available online. It shows that we can improve the current data systems at the national level, and we are applying high-level sensitivity analysis methods to estimate the emission factors that are kindly tailored to the local realities of those countries. So the other example is more the scenario. So this is more mitigation scenario. I slightly disagree with what Roy said, that in Africa we cannot reduce the total emissions because we are showing that actually by adopting best feed management practices, animal breeding management practices, we are able to reduce emissions even within the livestock systems in Africa. So we have done this for many countries. You can see from our website. So we have a couple of reports that are helping countries to redesign their livestock-related mitigation adaptation strategies in NDC. One example in policy alignment, I'm coming to the conclusion here. So, but I want to give a couple of examples. So this is for Rwanda. So what we have been looking at, we look at NDC 2.0. So what you see on the axis, x-axis here, those are the mitigation measures that we found in NDC. And then we compared with policies to see how many policies are supporting the implementation of those measures. As you can see, most of those mitigation measures were supported or indirectly supported, except, for instance, the biogas. The biogas was really not well addressed across policies. Even the energy policy didn't strongly support the biogas system, for instance, for manure. The other thing we looked at, we inverted now. So we looked at how policies support the NDC. So in Rwanda in particular, we have one livestock development policy. So this is number one here. That is fully aligned with NDC commitment. So meaning that within the national policy, a country can already implement livestock measures. So this is a picture we would want to see for most of countries in Africa in terms of aligning NDC commitment, climate commitment, and livestock development policies. So unfortunately, this is one case out of 54 in terms of policy alignment, but we believe that this could be a best way of embedding livestock-related measures within the national policies. So we published a couple of reports. They are all called Livestock Climate Action in X countries. So we have already published six of those reports that you can find online. And we are continuing to engage across different projects with countries to better align the national livestock commitment with, of course, the livestock development objectives. And the idea here is that even if a country doesn't have a measure in NDC, we do the same study, because here we showed which measure can be integrated. So that's where we are, and unfortunately we cannot support all countries at the same time because we are not a big team here. But the idea is really to team up with partners like AfCAP to take this work forward, because I believe it's very important, and we have seen countries already like Burkina Faso and Senegal coming up with now a language on mitigation, their NDC, which was not there. Recently, we supported Morocco. We are still doing with support of CCAC, for instance. And Morocco also is making a huge commitment on methane reduction in NDC 3.0. So this is how we are doing it, and we believe that if we provide much more evidence to countries are willing to commit. But of course, we need to bring in finance for implementation. That's where you conclude, showing some examples. For example, how we handled over those reports. This was in Rwanda, where our FAO representative handed the report to the Minister of Agriculture. And this was in Zimbabwe, where the report was handed over to the permanent secretary of the Minister of Environment in Zimbabwe. So this is really a good collaboration we have with countries, and we believe this is a good way to go to influence policies. So in conclusion, we need credible NDC targets, but we need also strong MRVs. This is very important, and this can be achieved through coordination, what we call institutional arrangement, but also by engaging many countries on this journey. Because most countries tend not to commit because they cannot analyze. And of course, it makes sense because you cannot reduce what you cannot measure. So this is really where MRV system are important. The second point is more the finance. So as most of those commitments are conditional, of course, it's difficult to mobilize this amount of money. This is more than the global climate finance in the total. So meaning that working with countries to make sure that some of those commitments are embedded in their national development programs will be a key, so that they can be achieved within the national budget. The last point is more about the strong use of tier 2 approaches, so high methodology tier, because this is how we can demonstrate the different options we have in terms of management, feed strategies to reduce emissions at farm level. On that, I want to thank you for the opportunity. Over to you, Shirley.
Right. Thank you so much, Amable, for that beautifully put presentation. Also, just sharing some of the work or the reports that you've done in different countries, which you said they can be found online. I think now we've come to our Q&A session. So if you have any burning question or even a comment, please feel free to drop it in the chat box, or you can also just raise your hand and you can unmute to ask away. Any questions? I'm not seeing, is anyone seeing any hands somewhere?
Can I make a comment? I was writing, but I thought maybe I can even make this comment. I would be really interested to hear about country realities now, about really learn about what's going on in the countries and where are the struggles, so that we can really take this on also and tailor our support correctly. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to take the floor.
Sorry, is that for Amable?
No, this is mostly for those who are actually sitting in different countries or seeing the realities in countries, maybe representing also ministries or country-based institutions, so that we get a sense of what's going on in the countries. Thank you.
Sure. So if you have that, you can feel free to raise your hand and you can just like take the floor. I saw Claudia's hand is up. You can go ahead and ask away. Then it's Dr. Aydens after.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for the nice presentation. So I think one point that comes up is really data, and there's not a lot of data on mitigation around Africa, unfortunately. And I've also found it actually quite hard to raise money for data because nobody wants to pay for it because it's very expensive. And then the other point is what hasn't been raised actually is capacity building. No, it has been raised, but I guess still, like, we need capacity build, we need people trained, we need more students and so on, because it's a relatively new topic and there aren't that many experts on the topic yet. So it would be quite helpful. And the problem I see personally is that we train a lot of people, but at Mazingira, at Ildi, Nairobi, but we're limited to the number of people we can effectively train, right? But even getting PhD scholarships is not that simple, and getting PhD scholarships that go beyond 3 years is not that simple to make sure that people actually can finish, because it's just not doable in 3 years, but a lot of PhD scholarships just around 3 years. Yeah, I think these are my thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for sharing that. I saw there was Dr. Aydens, I think. Do you still want to take the floor and ask away or comment?
I think you mean Dr. Darrow, Claire.
I think their name disappeared on my screen, so yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Darrow, do you still want to ask, or was your question addressed? Okay, it's not coming off mute. I also saw there was a hand from Eden. I don't know if Eden also wanted to ask a question.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes,
Dr. Darrow.
Yes, thank you very much, my colleagues. Due to we are already in the festival of the Eid Mubarak yesterday and tomorrow up to the Sunday, due to of your commitment, that's why I have joined and working with the home. I really appreciate to be part of the AfCAP and mission of this. You know that Somalia, I have been joined for the last presentation of the FOA and mentioned several keynotes, including the intervention of the feed and fodder, the livestock insurance, and the NDC. Although Somalia is the only country in the Africa that has been already submitted NDC 3. So although Somalia, in the aspect of the livestock, is a backbone, and 50% of the GDP comes from the livestock. So that's why we have a Ministry of Livestock, Forestry and Range that is responsible and mandated for the livestock, and it is feed and fodder together with the forestry sector. So for the last years, we have been faced the drought season, which have been busted away more than 2 million of the livestock on behalf of the climatic shocks, recurrent droughts for each every year. And now we are starting with the rainy season. Sometimes it may have been floods. So, and last year we have been submitted the key priority areas for the livestock infection of the NDC. So Somalia still has not committed and cooperation with you. So how can we make a good platform that's suitable and facilitator to cooperate with you and to push all the donors to start and to make fundraising in order to make intervention? We have it is remarkable for you to share with you. There is now ongoing of the livestock insurance as a subsidiary funded by the World Bank as a regional project. It's called Drive. Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. Although Somalia is not alone, while our neighboring two countries is alone. So such initiative we need to mitigate and adaptate the climatic shocks on behalf of the shock. So how can we make the engagement even as a ministerial level or the general the DG or as a country? Even if you want, we can engage you in the Somalia and make. And we have already developed a 5 years of the NTB called National Transformation Plan for the country as a national agenda. So Minister of Livestock is a part of that. One of the now is there is several initiatives going on now. So how can we make and cooperate and coordinate together with the Somalia? Although Somalia is one of the fragile and fragile shocks for the climatic shock. So how can we make cooperation, even if it's our review or if it is making to give hand support with the joining in the international or regional meeting in order to raise our concern and make fundraising together with you with that meeting. Is my question. If you need the priority of the livestock, I will submit for you. Over to you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your invitation about this.
Thank you, Arden, and thank you for sharing your experience as well as your question. I think this is for Catherine or Amable.
I mean, I'm happy to come in quickly and then pass over as well because yeah, I think in terms of how we can support the countries, I just wanted to note that yeah, we always are looking for where there's need, and countries are welcome to engage with us so that we can scope out how to see the best pathway forward. And I just wanted to also mention to Dr. Dero, because I know he has engaged with us in the past. So this new chapter for us with UNOPS is we're hoping it's going to be a lot easier and more flexible than previously it was, because previously we had restrictions on countries that we could work with because all of our bilateral support had to be approved by the US State Department, where there's a lot more flexibility with within UNOPS. So yeah, we really are now more able to respond to countries to requests from Somalia. So happy to engage with you further on this. But yeah, I'll pass over to our other colleagues on what other sort of offers there might be.
I couldn't find my hand. I needed to use my physical hand. But if you allow me, Roy and Sigle, I would like to say a few words as well. And Dr. Aden, it's really great to hear from you. We are very well aware of the incredible progress that Somalia has made. We are working very closely with Somalia. We are very present in Somalia also. UNOPS is working very closely with the government there. So that's also an interesting element. But what is more, we are also hosting the NDC partnership, and I wanted to mention that of course these collaboration, and I just come back from the steering committee of the NDC partnership, where there is a clear focus now on implementation. And as I mentioned also in my opening speech, this is really a clear example of what tools are required to put things on the ground. And I also like the comment of Claudia about the financing that is available. I think we need to be clearer in messaging to donors about why this is such a good investment, why donors should invest into really enhancing these strong tools. And as I also put into the chat, we also manage the ICAT, the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency, who could work with the GCAP on really working, supporting countries and setting up the systems and training people. And there are some good examples of how this has happened in Africa in some of the regions. So but to come back to Dr. Aiden's comment of how can we make it clear that that we address specific needs there. Yeah, we are there to serve those in need and work with all developing countries, and in particular the most vulnerable. And I think there is no doubt that Somalia has a strong justification to be looked at. I think my suggestion would be really to come back now also with the very specific ideas of how best to work and address your concerns. The GCAP has a specific model through peer-to-peer learning, through exchange platforms and so on, but it can also help then, of course, to connect to other means. So I would like to invite Roy, of course, and his fabulous team, but also you, Dr. Aiden, and others alike, to really make very clear suggestions and demands of what it is that you need, so that we can then together with Roy and his team tailor the interventions and make sure that it acts swiftly and really meets your clear needs there, or helps to provide other information that is required in this respect. So we are really interested to make this an even more vibrant platform to identify needs, team up potentially also if there is a specific cluster of needs, and then tailor the response accordingly. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Catherine, as well as Roy. We are close to wrapping up our webinar. I see Jamie had a question. I don't know if I'm able to squeeze in a little answer there, but I can read it to you as well if you haven't seen
No,
that.
I read it. Just quickly saying that we have not really done this type of comparison between regions, but what we can see is that countries in Eastern and Southern Africa have made a huge progress, especially on the mitigation side. But it's because they have also received more support. So it's also that the reality that they have been supported on the MRV side in terms of across different projects, for example, with CCAC and the other partners. But we see that countries are making progress. However, I think as Catherine mentioned and also asked about, what is happening is that strengthening the national capacity is not really enough to move to actions. So what we really want to make sure that there is a good collaboration across institutions, so that when they make the commitment, they do a collective commitment. So that is much more easier to translate those commitments into programs, initiatives that can be funded both domestically and internationally. Because we found out that once there is a project coming in to support, there is a huge willingness to address the issue. So, and I see that, and of course, some governments are very keen to support this through domestic funding, which I think is also a good progress. But of course, livestock remain, especially the pastoral systems, remain very challenging in terms of investment in pastoral systems because of how those systems are managed, the number of people involved, and of course, livestock plays a big role in the livelihood of those people. That's why we need to take into account the whole landscape using a more system approach in addressing the problem, which I believe would be the best way forward. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. I don't want to step between our colleagues and the lunch, so I want to stop here and back to you, Shinle.
Thank you so much, Amable. We are literally supposed to be closing the webinar, but I saw Christopher had his hand up. I will give you just like a minute and just a quick, like you can go through and ask your question.
Yeah, so I do not really have a question other than wanted to thank you and the presenters as well as all of the interventions already made. Sorry for my side, I joined a bit late because of conflicts within the time. I was wondering whether you're going to share the link for the recorded versions of this so that we that joined could probably benefit from this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. All right, thank you so much. So we've come to the end of our webinar, but before that, we will put up a post-event poll for you to populate for us quickly. I think it's gonna come up on the screen just now, right, Jamie?
Yes, it has come.
Yeah, please go ahead and populate that for us just quickly. While you guys do that, I would like to thank you all. And thank our speakers from FAO and UNOPS and Roy for those insightful contributions and conversations. And thank you to all the participants that joined today. And also just on behalf of AfCAP, thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to continuing this important conversation and just working together in terms of advancing and climate action in the livestock sector across Africa. I think it was a good conversation. Thank you all once again. And